Oh, I don't have any music going. Let me fix that quick. And we'll get on our way. Play here. Cool. Are we up and running? We are up and running. Hello, hello, everybody. Hello, hello. This is Philosophy Roulette, number 218. And I had a request from one of the longtime viewers, I guess now, of the stream, Cinesemiotics. So I'm going to read a paper that was requested. Let's see. It's called Literary Self-Reference, 5 Types of Liars Paradox by David Lehner. So give everyone a minute for the email to get sent out, and then we'll get started reading soon enough. So do I even hear the music? So yeah, I mean, it's like I've got this all preloaded. So okay. But normally what happens here on Philosophy Roulette is I go and fill papers, for those who don't know, and see what is on the front page of the newly released. So let's just take a quick look. Really boring art. Good boring art, but why should, yeah, so that's a good question. So we've got some interesting stuff here. I wonder how long this paper is. Let's see, this one, not that one. So, because there's open access. Take a look real quick, because this could be read. Oh, 30 pages. Does it have pictures? It'd be really cool if it had pictures. Why does it not have pictures? You're about art. You should have pictures. It'd be a lot of fun if you had pictures. No pictures. Oh my god. I mean, come on, people. If you're gonna make art papers, you should at least have pictures. Got Urkentness, Mind and Language. Ooh, looks like everyone's publishing again. Philosophia, Philosophy Compass, Utilitas. Look at all this good stuff coming out. Slurs, Neutral Counterparts, and What You Could Have Said. These are sometimes fun papers because you get to talk about curses. Alright, so look at all that stuff. But yeah. What's this one? Oh, well, whatever. 2 windows. But anywho, that is not the topic of today. The topic of today is literary self-reference, 5 types of liars paradoxes. So, now, full disclosure, I actually know something about this topic. So, I'm by no means an expert on the liar's paradox, but I do know something on semantic paradoxes. I am no expert on literature, though, either. So, we'll see what this is about. I don't read abstracts. But yeah, cool. So let's go. Although both lying and creating fictions are self-conscious activities. I mean, do we always know when we're lying, or if we don't know, we might be deluding ourselves, I guess. So generally lying is thought to be, self-conscious. That's fair. Some writers choose to intensify this element of self-consciousness by drawing the reader's attention to the fictive nature of their work. Miguel de Cervantes, for example, has Don Quixote and Sancho Panza discuss a book about themselves called Don Quixote. They wonder, among other things, how the book's author was able to describe incidents that occurred when they thought they were alone. The narrator of Lawrence Stern's Tristram Shandy discusses the truthfulness and accuracy of history and yet laments that critics will probably consider the book mere romance. Julio Cortázar and Jorge Luis Borges have characters sit down and read a book only to find that the frame of the fictional tale has engulfed their real world. Yeah, so we've got some sort of self-reference going on here. Now the question is it actually intensify the element of self-consciousness or self-reference? I'm not entirely certain, because it's the consciousness of the characters that is doing the work there, but it's the self-reference in the book. It's not. It's the question is it the consciousness or self-reference of the or is it the self-reference, not self-consciousness, that's getting highlighted right there? So that's one quick question, although I don't think it'll make a big difference in the long run here. The practice of framing and reframing the fictional stance of story has come to be called metafiction. Although its origins go back a long way, it has seen a considerable flowering in our time. Accordingly, critical attention to the mode has expanded and much of the resulting theoretical work is illuminated. On the other hand, a tendency has also arisen to exaggerate the claims of the metafictional mode. Patricia Waugh, for example, and I apologize how I say your name, writes, in providing a critique of their own methods of construction, such as writing, not only examine the fundamental structures of narrative fiction, they also explore the possible fictionality of the world outside the literary fictional text. What's the footnote here? Let's see. Okay, maybe it's just some sort of reference. Yeah. Cool. Now, what does this actually mean? Possible fictionality of the world outside the literary fictional text. So, what do you mean by fictionality here? Like, this is an interesting use of this word. The possible fictionality of the world outside the fiction. So it's saying something about the bigger world that isn't the fiction at that point. So it would be something. Yes, it's something outside the fictional text, but like it doesn't. But exactly what is it talking about is that's not so hard to pin down. Is it talking about the real world? Is it talking about some sort of metaphysics? And if it's a metaphysics within a fiction, does that metaphysics align with our metaphysics? I don't know. But I mean, that'd be a good question. Like, could you have there is definitely, like, say in a fantasy book, and they have some sort of thing that happens in the fantasy book where you get yourself into a liar's paradox. But in that universe, the metaphysics are different than our universe, and so something different happens there. Oh, excuse me. So, I don't know what... You might actually have, like, a different outside of the literary fiction. You could have, like, a whole sort of different thing happen there. It doesn't even have to be the real world. It could be some other world that wouldn't be the fictional text. Because it could be, like, something just speculative, not necessarily fictional. Anywho, continuing. And anyway, anyone watching at the moment, feel free to ask questions. This is Literary Self-Reference, 5 Types of Liar's Paradox by David Lehner. This was a request by Cinesemiotics, so I hope Cinesemiotics can stop by today. Writers of fiction have indeed explored in their works this twilight zone between fiction and reality. This is what I was just talking about, twilight. What is this space that exists when people start doing these meta-references in fiction? John Barth, in Life Story, imagines a character who happens to be a novelist who begins to question his own reality in relation to the fictional world he creates. He being by vocation an author of novels and stories, it was perhaps inevitable that one afternoon the possibility would occur to the writer of these lines that his own life might be a fiction in which he was the leading or an accessory character. The essence of the metafictional mode could not be more concisely put than this. There is always within it a questioning of the division between fiction and reality. And if you are in the United States nowadays, we have a whole lot of people that don't seem to be able to grasp what exists in fiction and reality now. And so we sort of have this sort of political problem at the moment where people are running around questioning what counts as fiction and reality, and they sort of seem to think that they are leading characters in an ongoing play that has nothing to do with reality. And it's rather disconcerting. Barth's use of the phrase, the writer of these lines, gives his tale an extra self-referential spin, since in the context of the story there are no other lines to refer to other than the ones we are reading. This doubling of self-reference produces an ambiguity that points to the real writer, John Barth, as well to his fictional creation. Yeah, so is it the narrator, the writer, John Barth, or the person in the story? The use of such a device makes it almost impossible to determine who is meant to be speaking in the piece and what plane of reality they are supposed to be speaking about. Wall concludes from the employment of such devices that literary fiction simply demonstrates the existence of multiple realities. Okay. So that's what we're going to call a fiction. It's just the fiction is a separate reality from our own. We're not actually specifying that it is in our world and is something fictional in our world, but it might just be another reality, and we could call it a fiction, but that doesn't. We shouldn't. We should be more careful because it could be the actual reality, and we could be we could be a figment of their imagination just as much as we think they are a figment of our imagination. Okay. But do such self-conscious devices really force us to question reality of the world around us? A character may say that he has a reason to doubt the reality of reality, but that does not mean that there is a reason to doubt it. Yeah. Instead, we may find that literary self-reference is more properly a symptom of the self-consciousness of the authorial voice and not an indication of the possible fictionality of the world outside the novel. That is, the metafictional mode does not reveal the unreality of reality, but rather is a sign of the author's relation to that reality. Okay? So, yeah, fine. Some critics have gone further than this, however, and have argued that the metafictional mode even calls into question the possibility of representing the relation of author to reality at all. They argue that metafictional self-reference produces a kind of liar's paradox by means of which the very foundations of representation are shown to be paradoxical. Indeed, schools of writers have arisen who devote their craft to the exemplification of this paradox in their works. These claims, however, may also be exaggerated. Let's see. DeMarshall, hey Noger, what's up? Yeah, good timing. Hey DeMarshall, what's up? Cool. I don't know why the timing's good, but happy you're here. Yeah, this is a request from Cinesemiotics. So we're reading something about liar's paradox in literature. So I like how I have to permit my own name in my own chat. That's kind of funky. It should have been added a long time ago, but whatever. Shake my head. The liar's paradox, although it may not be resolvable, can at least give a precise formulation, and it should be possible to demonstrate that the paradoxes exemplified by these literary works are not actual types of liar's paradox. Cool. Yeah, I mean, again, now, like I was saying earlier, I do know something about the liar's paradox, semantic paradoxes and the like, and so what do you actually count as liar's paradox? There's a bunch of semantic paradoxes. Some of them are slightly different. I mean, if they're not actually a liar's paradox, maybe it won't matter. I mean, if they're just like some other related semantic paradox, who cares? Like, so what? It's like just one of the family. If they're not actually paradoxes, then that's something different. But yeah, your main shock. Okay. In the case of thinkers such as Jacques Derrida and Paul de Man, the use of self-referential devices is not what calls into question the meaningfulness of language, but language itself. To these writers, the liar's paradox is taken to be the paradigm of all representation. To Derrida, the literary text produces an endless series of inscriptions, a perpetual redoubling of text upon text, such that the original act of mimesis will always be lost beyond recall. To de Man, the interpretation of a sign leads not to meaning, but to another sign, and so on ad infinitum. Mirroring the liar's paradox, the literary text, according to de Man, simultaneously asserts and denies the authority of its own rhetorical mode. Okay, I mean, it's not the meaningfulness of language, but of like what is going on in language. Fine, but I mean, this sort of seems like splitting hairs up here. It's like, sure, if the language, it's not that language lacks meaning, but then like what is language doing at all? But I mean, sure, either way, it's fine. You're not gonna, you're still running into like paradox, kind of. That's sort of the point. I mean, that'd just be like, what is the paradox? It's half of one or like 12 of the other, or whatever it is. Anyway, these claims of the essential paradoxicality of representation fly in the face of common sense. What do we do with language every day does not seem to be meaningless. Well, they weren't saying that. It's only in the case of the paradoxes, I thought. Yeah. So how do such views arise? Well, what may be happening is, to borrow a phrase from Ludwig Wittgenstein, we have allowed a picture to hold us captive, in this case a picture of the liar's paradox. We have a vision of a paradox in representation, and we indiscriminately apply that picture to what are only remotely similar situations. In order to free ourselves from this picture, we must first clarify in our minds precisely what does and what does not belong in the category of a liar's paradox. Oh, so the author here is saying, look, these people up here are applying the lesson from the liar's paradox everywhere. That language is just always a sign upon a sign upon a sign, and therefore, or it's a doubling upon a doubling upon a doubling, and therefore you're not actually getting you're not getting to the bottom of anything. And then so coming down here, we're saying, Wittgenstein's saying, look, you got to stop somewhere. The analysis has to end somewhere. You can't just keep going on. And so the idea that you're just going to apply inductively to all things the lesson of the liar's paradox is probably not the way to go. And I guess that's what the Wittgensteinian argument is here. Okay. So the question is, how is the author going to now limit the range of the liar's paradox? And this is a common sort of thing when you get into people trying to deal with the liar's paradox, is to put limits on it, that it only applies so far and in only certain circumstances. So one of the earliest forms of the liar's paradox is the so-called paradox of the Cretan liar, in which Epimenides, the Cretan, says all Cretans are liars. If Epimenides' statement is taken as true, then it is false in his own case, thus producing a situation in which we might call a half paradox. A statement turns false if it is taken as true. In this case, however, the paradox only works in one direction. If Epimenides' statement is taken as false, and realistically it must be, then the statement is both untrue and non-paradoxical. So, yeah. This is actually one of the, this is a good example, because this is what a lot of people think. You're going to get yourself caught in paradox, but a lot of times if you just take it as false to begin with, then a lot of these times they're half paradox. You get out of it. The problem is if you take it to be true to begin with, then you get yourself into a paradoxic, more contradictions than you need to be in. Okay. A stronger version of the liar's paradox comes from the medieval logician John Buridan. What I am saying is false. Buridan calls such statements sophisms, and he analyzes this one according to the following schema. 1. If the sophism is true, it is false. If the sophism is false, it is true. If the sophism is true, it is both true and false. If the sophism is false, it is both true and false. Either the sophism is true or it is false. The sophism is both true and false. So, this is someone who is in the parlance got both true and false. You can do it's both true and is both true and is false at the same time. It's not neither, but it is both. A glutty analysis, as sometimes it's called, or overlapping. I think that's better. So instead of a gap between things that they don't have a true and false, then this is an overlap where they both have true and false. Okay. Buridan's analysis brings out precisely what is lacking in the Cretan paradox, that the paradoxicality of the statement is a result of its reversibility. When we try to establish 1 is true, 2 becomes true. When we try to establish 2 is true, 1 becomes true, and so on ad infinitum. Yeah. This last point becomes crucial, since many statements that appear to be liar paradoxical are not so because they are not reversible in this sense. For example, the statement, every statement is false, sounds like a liar's paradox, because if every statement in the world did in fact happen to be false, then the statement would be true, hence rendering itself false. But if we were to reverse the statement, we produce a proposition that is clearly true and non-paradoxical. It is false that every statement is false. Yeah. For this reason, reversibility becomes an essential characteristic of the liar's paradox. In the logical parlance, it's basically saying you have to be able to add. If you add a negation, it doesn't do anything to it. These statements have problems because once you add a negation, then they become much more tractable. You can make sense of them. Because of course it's not true that every statement is false. It's false that every statement is false. Yeah, not everything is false, and then it's fine. But yeah, so the thing about the liar's paradox is that adding negations don't really matter. Negations are transparent. They don't do anything. So, yeah. So, is one of the things about it. It's a statement about negation. Okay, so we just reverse any paradoxical claim. No, like the stronger versions of the paradoxes don't matter if you put a negation in front of them. You get yourself into the exact same problem no matter what. But for some of the ones that look paradoxical, sometimes it's not the case. They start with they start looking paradoxical, but you can kind of wiggle your way out. But some of the ones that are just like, if I say this statement is not true, and I say it's not the case that this statement is not true, and I say, well, this is the case that this statement is true, then what makes it true? It's like, well, I'm not lying. Well, if I'm not lying, then I am lying. It's like, well, like you can get yourself adding negation can either make the statement always true, but like you don't always want that to be the case. So like you have to be careful. So if I'm saying I'm lying right now means I'm lying, but then I'm also telling the truth about what I'm saying. But if I'm saying I'm not lying right now, then that's just a plain statement. But see, that misses the point in some sense. So yeah, I don't think I said that right. If you reverse it, a lot of these things, yeah, screwed this one up. That's okay. If you want to say a lot of these paradoxical things, if you throw a negation from them, they become tautologies. That's what I should have said. It's not that they cease to become paradoxical, it's that the semantics have to be different. Reversing a paradoxical claim a lot of times gets you into something that's always true. So if I say I am not lying, then there's no way that you actually can make that statement false, because it's, instead of always being true and false, this one's always true. Because if I was lying about it, then it would just be false. Actually, no. I'm losing it now. This is the problem. You have to be able to reverse this statement in some sense, because it looks fine in certain cases, but it's the question is where the negation is. Is the negation transparent? Like if you just add a negation to it, what happens to the statement? If you don't add the negation, what happens to it? So in this one, every statement is false. Sounds like a liar's paradox, because if every statement in the world was in fact false, this statement would be true, hence rendering itself false. But if we reverse the statement, we produce a proposition that's clearly true and non-paradoxical. It is false that every statement is false. For this reason, reversibility becomes an essential characteristic of the liar's paradox. Does it, though? So, and this is what the point was up here. If the sophism is true, then it is false. If the sophism is false, then it is true. If the sophism is true, it is both true and false. If the sophism is false, it is both true and false. Either the sophism is true or it is false. The sophism is both true and false. Now here's the problem. Where is the negation here? You don't see any negations up here. And so what exactly is the reversibility of the statement up here? What's getting reversed is this flip between true and false. There's not actually a negation here, so you got to be really careful. This is why I'm getting myself tripped up, because what's happening in this paper, which is kind of interesting, is we've got this claim about reversibility, but we're not exactly sure what's being reversed. And that's what tripped me up a minute ago, and that's what we got to be careful about right here. Okay. So let's continue and see where we get with this one. Because you see right here, let me just point this out one more time so I don't completely make a fool out of myself. It says it is false right here. This is putting a negation in front of the statement, every statement is false. Notice that did not happen up here. They did not do that. And why did they not do that? I'm not exactly sure, but why is it reversibility an important thing with paradoxes? And showing that this is this kind of reverse here is not happening up here, and this is making me kind of worried now that something has gone wrong in this analysis. But yeah, but this is only one issue here in this paper so far, so that I'm not exactly sure about, but I got tripped up on it. A third qualification for the liar's paradox is complete self-reference. Epimenides' statement in the Cretan paradox is not in itself paradoxical, because it is only a contingent matter that Epimenides is a Cretan. Well, That's okay. A lot of things are contingent. The statement would not be paradoxical, for example, if I said it. Verdon's statement, what I am saying is false, somewhat avoids the shortcoming by employing the first person singular pronoun for the referring element, thereby making the statement's reference dependent only on the existence of the individual speaker. Today, most logicians prefer an even simpler formulation. This statement is false. Here, the statement seems to make reference only to itself. Yeah, so this is the more preferred thing nowadays. I'll get to it in a second to Marshall. Because you don't have to worry about other problems. That doesn't make these anything necessarily less paradoxical up here, but it does make it a lot easier just to focus on something like this statement is false right there. Okay, I'm following what you said, but my question is, if we make a statement always true, that's great, but what happens to the paradoxical statement? Then Derrida is right, or what are we trying to claim in this paper? I don't actually know what we're trying to claim in this paper at the moment. I don't know really where we're going. I didn't read the abstract, so I don't know where we're going. This author seemed to be disagreeing with Derrida before. So what I suspect is going to happen is that this analysis of the paradox is going to, in some sense, try to limit the range of the liar paradox. So we're not going to go the full Derrida route. We're going to go and give some sort of restricted version of the paradox that applies to literature. And that's what the, I think, author wants to do, is say something about the form of the liar paradox that exists in literature. So I think that's how it's gone. That's what's going on here. So we've got like this, that first is the language analysis, was what you're talking about, that we're just talking about things doubling on itself, signs upon signs. And he says, well, look, we have to stop somewhere. And then the next thing he says is, look, it has this property of reversibility, which I'm a little shaky on at the moment. And it says, so that's a property we have to look for. And then also that it has to be, you don't really want to be talking about extra stuff you don't need, like talking about contingent facts. You want it to be only the core of the paradox is just a complete self-reference. So that's another thing. It says reversibility and complete self-reference. Well, let's see where we get with that. Okay, when we review the criteria above, we find that to be a case of liar's paradox. A statement must be 1, contradictory, 2, reversible, and 3, self-referential. What we will find is that many paradoxes appear to be liar paradoxical without actually being so. Furthermore, many puzzles regarding literary self-reference appear to produce paradoxes without actually producing them. Okay, so this is what the author's strategy is here. They're giving you 3 criteria and saying if it doesn't hit these 3 criteria, it's not actually a paradox. I will grant that if you're going to make a paradox, it does kind of have to contradict, or else it's not getting even, that's like the minimum thing. It at least has to contradict somewhere. Because, I mean, there's everyday contradictions. You say, look, this is blue, you say that's red. You say, well, it's not, if it's not blue, you say it's blue and you say it's not blue. No, it is blue and you say it's not blue. Well, that's a contradiction, but that's not a paradox. But you need at least that. The reversibility, I'm still questioned on. And the self-referential, I mean, that's the definition of a semantic paradox, is in some sense it has to refer to its own self in some way. But, I mean, does it have to be completely self-referential? I don't know. Like the Cretan paradox, it is paradoxical. It may not be fully self-referential, like more self-contained self-referential, like this statement is false. But then again, there may be even better formulations we get in the future, and then we'd have to say that this one was like inaccurate. I'd still give the Cretan paradox its due. I mean, even though you can get out of the Cretan paradox, as the author said, but you want to kind of, I mean, come on, give the Greek some credit. Okay. Complete paradoxical self-reference would lead, if we tried to resolve its contradictions, to an endless regress. Well, I mean, some logicians would take issue with that. You don't always have to fail. Such a paradox would indeed cause the breakdown of meaning in any closed and strictly logical system of communication. Again, this is what logicians work on, so I don't buy this. But I mean, most people go with that, but doesn't have to be the case. Fortunately, the only such systems we encounter are artificial ones, such as the languages encoded into computers. In human discourse, paradoxes are by no means so devastating. Okay, this is the thing. If you are going with computer systems that can't handle contradictions, then yeah, it does break down. But that's not actually the world that we live in. So that's the question. What is the right logic for paradox? And yeah, so it's like, we'll see. Even the most ardent logicians obsessed with paradoxes must sooner or later rest from their labors and ask in non-paradoxical terms for a cup of coffee or a bite to eat. This simple fact actually provides us with the first clue as to how we resolve the paradoxes supposedly embedded in literary works. Nonetheless, for the sake of argument, I will assume that these various literary puzzles are indeed paradoxes in order to contrast them with the liar's paradox. You might not know some of the logicians I know, my friend. I know some very hardened logicians. The first case in what we might call the reader's paradox, such as we found in Don Quixote, in which a character in the novel picks up a book and begins to read about himself in the same novel we are reading. This technique produces an uncanny mirror-in-a-mirror effect. If we think the situation through, we can imagine the fictional reader reaching the point in the novel in which he is reading the novel, and thus he would be reading about himself, and so on ad infinitum. In our text or a computer program, If our text were a computer program and not a novel, the story would come to a crashing halt right there. And for those fans of Spaceballs, this is the scene where they pick up the cassette tape of Spaceballs the movie while they're in the movie, and then they watch the movie that they're in while they're making the movie, and they hit play right when they are playing, and it says, "What's going on?" And the guy goes, "We're at now." We're at now. Everything that's happening now is happening now. We'll go back to then. When? Go now. But yeah. So yeah, you can go look at that real quick on YouTube. There's a clip of "We're at now." I love that scene. Okay. But yeah, so Spaceballs reference. Of course, the novel could come to a halt, but that would not be a result of the paradox, but rather because the novelist felt this was an appropriate place to stop. Okay, so what the author is saying here is, look, if you were to actually read a book of yourself reading a book, it would take you the same amount of time to read about yourself reading, and of course, taking yourself reading and you reading in the book would take that same amount of time too, so you'd be reading for an infinite amount of time. And that's why a computer program would crash, because it would need an infinite amount of time to simulate its own processes. Because it'd be simulating its processes and then simulating the same process, which all takes time, which would take an infinite of time and energy. And same with you reading. So, and that's the thing. That's why the author's saying you have to just stop and get a cup of coffee, because you just stop thinking about it after a while. Cinesemiotics, hey yo, I'm reading your paper. Hope you're happy. Yeah, exactly. It's looping, DeMarshall. That's what the Derrida was saying above. Okay, so of course, the novel could come to a halt, but that would not be a result of the paradox, but rather because the novelist felt that this was an appropriate place to stop. The infinite regress produced by the liar's paradox is driven by our desire to give a definite truth value to a single proposition. But this is not what is happening when we are reading a novel. Rather, we are following a story, and if that story happens to include some paradoxes along the way, we think about them only to the extent that they impinge on the actions or themes of the work. More important, the regress produced by this literary technique is merely sequential and not logical. Although the use of regress devices in a novel may be intriguing and stimulating, there is nothing contradictory about it. The truth claims of the novel, whatever they may be, are not contradicted by having a character within the novel read something about the novel. Well, maybe, maybe not. I mean, depends what logic the character... The more loops, the closer to intelligence, self-awareness, not just on wordplay and literature. Yes, I'm actually agreeing with this one. Because I don't agree with this analysis right here, and let me tell you why. What is the logic that the character in the book is using? You have to ask, what is the logic in the fictional world? Because if they are breaking the fictional logic, then they're breaking their world. And if they're breaking their world, they might also be breaking our world, because you are like involved with that. You can't just say, look, just because it's intriguing and similar, there's nothing contradictory about it, because they are, because it's a sequential and not logical. I disagree with this. If you're going to say something is sequential, it's sequential in our world because we're reading it. For the character in the story, they are not reading this sequentially. It is logical for them in the story. And that's part of the thing. For them, if they are reading about themselves in a book, that breaks the logic of their world, unless they are using a logic that can handle these sorts of things, but that gets very hairy very quickly. But it is not merely sequential. It's only sequential for us outside, not for the character in there. And if it breaks the logic in the story, then it also breaks the sequentiality of the book for us. So, I'm not like this. I disagree with this analysis right here because you have to also treat the people in the fiction as like sort of rational beings and their world as a rational world in some sense. So, consider a foray into cultural and ideological criticism. I've got enough problems, my friend. Hey, Bubba Bloop, how's it going? But yeah, let me continue here. Bubba Blue, thank you for the emotes. Yeah, we're reading a literary self-reference, 5 Types of Liar Paradox. So this is when, characters read, like, in Spaceballs when they stop it now. Or in Don Quixote where they read a book entitled Don Quixote, and it's about the characters in the book reading the Don Quixote. I actually heard some logicians discussing the Don Quixote and how that book was written. That book was not written and published all at once, and so I think the author actually went back and changed things according to how the book actually turned out. So there was to make the self-reference even more impressive earlier in the book. Wait, what if the character is delivered is intentionally irrational? Again, it depends on what sort. Being John Malkovich. Oh, okay. So you've got something a little bit off kilter in one of your stories. That does not mean that the logic is irrational. It may mean that the person is sort of another author. It depends. It really just depends, because who is really at what logic is really at issue here? Is it the author's logic? Is it the character in the story's logic? Like, where is who is actually interacting with the logic? Because if the character's reading about themselves, then it's the logic of the character. If you're doing something sort of like metalogical, well, then you have to ask about all the characters in sort of the hierarchy, or like who the author is and all that stuff. So if you've got an intentionally irrational character, it might actually not matter, because it's at what level is the logic at, and who is interacting with it, and what is that logic in terms of the story. So you have to be careful. It may not actually matter what the characters think. It may just matter how it interacts with their entire universe. How is it that their universe allows for this sort of self-referentiality? Even if the character is irrational, I mean, that might be a good reaction to a very strange universe. I think, what was it? You get this in some of the idea is that their world is so very much like ours that it will include more bizarre things that will make it even more reliable to the reader. Yeah, relatable to the reader. Yeah. I was just thinking in some comics, and I'm not a comic book guy, but I heard that, what was it? Maybe the Punisher, and this might also happen in Batman. But a few of the protagonists, they have to know something. Some of these, the theme of Westworld, I wouldn't be surprised. But what was it? That their universe keeps producing better and better criminals for no apparent reason. Why are there always more and more crazier and crazier criminals? And it's sort of like they kind of start to realize that wherever they exist is not what they thought the world was supposed to be. And because it is, of course, commentary for us to say, like, this is not a normal world that they live in. And so some of these characters do realize that it's kind of strange that, like, these supervillains keep popping up. And so that is one of these meta referential things that goes on in a few comics. I don't know. I mean, I think Deadpool has some things like this too, but I don't. Again, I'm not a comic book person, but I think that's the whole point of Deadpool, because he actually knows he's a comic book character. I'm sorry if I spoiled that for anyone. Anywho, okay. Yeah. Let me know if I didn't get to any of your questions. But yeah, I'm gonna continue. I'm only about halfway through this. Okay. What makes the liar's paradox unique is that it is taken to say nothing about anything except its own truth conditions. But we can actually imagine a novel that is completely consumed in its own truth conditions, as the liar's paradox is. Cool, Blub Blub. Thanks for stopping by. Bon appetit. Can we actually imagine a novel that is completely consumed in its own truth conditions, as the liar's paradox is? Oh, maybe. Rather, it would seem that with the mere existence of a character or an alternate voice or a changing viewpoint or even a new situation, we have gone outside the range of the liar's paradox. The reader's paradox cannot for this reason be a liar's paradox, because it's not completely self-referential and consequently does not produce contradiction. Well, alright, let me get to cinesemiotics. But the literary self-awareness builds on itself, shifting from a footnote type of Easter egg to the serious business of bringing the reader or audience to notice that they are reading a fictional book and having a sort of intercourse with it. Yeah, and so that's part of like the story building. You need to build on it. Needs to be in some sense self-referential. Now, the issue here is, yeah, it may not be a liar's paradox. That doesn't mean it's not it's not paradoxical. Just because it's not the liar's specifically does not mean that the liar's paradox is the only paradox out there. There are other paradoxes. Of course, I'm blanking on the names, but I mean, if you're gonna do, I mean, I could nerd out right here and like, I mean, you've got like, I'm gonna actually start writing the logic, but it's a pain in the butt. So I'm not going to do it. But I mean, there's other paradoxes. There are other semantic paradoxes that are not identical to the liar's paradox. So it's like, you don't need to do it exactly. You can come up with a few other ones. It's like, all right. Yeah, over time in the evolution of our self-referential turn, yeah. You need to be able to, I mean, what else would you be doing in a novel if you weren't trying to bring people to do it? To do it right out the logic, I mean, it's one of these inevitable things that where if you try to do it in real time, you mess it up. It's just, that's the nature. All right, so that's like a Q, and Q is equal to, no. There's one of the things you learn. Never do logic in real time. It just is bad. It's very bad. Unless you are like, this is something you know straight, forward, and backwards. You have to be careful. Formal logic. Yeah, I'm not doing formal logic in a literary self-reference. Now here's a question, but like here's my problem, or here's the issue, not the problem. Just because this isn't bring up lustfully. Just because it's not the liar's paradox, is that a problem here? I don't think so. I mean, why would it be? Like that's okay. Like just because it's not this, it's not. Just because it's not that paradox. I don't think this is like, it's going to be a big issue. But let's see. Yeah, well, that's because you get excited about stuff, but then you realize it's a bad idea. And it's more important to realize when a bad idea, you find my, no, you should find my my foresight impressive. Not my lack of faith, my ability to know what bad things are down the road. That's what's really going on here. Not my lack of foresight, my lack of faith. My my foresight is good still. I'm not going to get force choked. Our second paradox we might call the speaker's paradox, in which a speaker in a fiction makes some comment about the fictional frame that surrounds him. This device is hinted at in Tristram Shandy and is used extensively by writers such as Barth and Borges. As with the reader's paradox, the speaker's paradox is not really a type of self-reference, but it might be what we could call reciprocal reference, insofar as the novel makes reference to characters and one of those characters makes reference to a novel, presumably the one we are reading. Yeah, so when you realize you are a character in a book that you are reading about yourself. or else you get someone pregnant. Yeah, well, there are also like, well, there's grandfather paradoxes. I mean, that's a good example. Could you go back in time and kill your own grandpa? Now, that's self-referential. It's not semantically self-referential. It's biologically self-referential and like temporally self-referential. So we've got like there's a whole bunch of things right here that could be happening. Now, you need semantics if you're doing stuff like this. Semiotic says Bill Murray is said to play the exact same character in all films, a character incredulous that he is expected to play along with ridiculous stuff. Yeah. That may just be a credit to Bill for like being that sort of engaging and doing something very similar in all of his films. But I mean, the question is, then have you also seen the arguments that some of these people, it's all the same universe since Bill Murray is always the same person? So therefore, all the movies he's been in are actually all one universe. So that means like Steve Zissou is in the same universe as Ghostbusters. Yeah, so. And you can square that. That's kind of interesting. He does he now? He has an interesting philosophy. I'd like to see that. It might be fun. As I have shown, whenever a novel begins to tell a story, the novel will be referring to more than its own truth conditions. A novel does not simply say, this statement is false, but even if in some strange way this was the full content of a novel, the character who questioned the reality of the novel would not be saying, this statement is false, but rather, that statement is false. And as we have seen, such a statement is not clearly paradoxical. Our universe, yeah. Well, yes, because he is also still alive. But is Bill Murray the same person when he's not acting? I don't know. Okay, so this right here is this is the in-world, it's called like you have an at. So this is asking, okay, where are we? Where is someone saying this? And so when the novel says this statement is false, that is at the novel level in our world. But if someone was in the book reading it, they would be in the world. And then they would not be saying this statement is false. They'd be saying some other statement is false. So that would be in the world talking about some other place. And so you have to be careful. You have to make sure you got yourself straight with who is talking, what voice is it. Because if you're talking about the wrong voice, I say I am lying right now, that's a liar's paradox. But if you are reading something saying that someone else is lying, that's not a paradox, because then you're just saying, well, that guy over there is lying. That's fine. But if I say I'm lying, then you get yourself into a problem. So this is just kind of you have to be careful. If the novel's saying it, like the narrator of the novel, is it the character? Yeah. Okie dokie. Westworld has lots of parks. Oh yeah, that's right. It was not all just the Wild West. Perspectivalism. Yes, perspectivism. Yeah, you have to be real careful. This is like, what world are you at? So there's like a crappy at symbol I drew over there. Okay. A third puzzle to consider is what we could call the writer's paradox. Semiotic says, no, but I mean all fiction that has major cultural force will find its way graying the line between fictional story and fictional story motivating actual real non-performing it. Yeah. Agents in the meat space world, yeah. In the actual world. That's 100% true, because people start to take it as truth, the way the world actually is. Even if it was only meant to be fiction at first. And so you have to be careful about that. Now, what exactly is getting, like, it becomes a cultural force, what exactly is getting pulled from the book? You know? What exactly is getting pulled? Is it the contradiction that is getting pulled? Probably not. I mean, we already know what paradoxes are. You're probably not... Yeah, QAnon. Oh, I actually mentioned that earlier today. We definitely have a problem with people thinking that they are caught up in some grand narrative and that they have roles to play in this grand narrative. So yeah. Now the question is that going to be paradoxical? I'd say no, because the things that they're pulling from that are generally not going to be the paradoxical things, because that would be them reading about themselves in a book, and that's not what the is going on with sort of modern contemporary politics. But the but yeah, it's called completely a contemporary issue. I actually mentioned that right at the start. I was thinking, yeah, we seriously have a problem with people not taking the truth from a story and bringing it into the outer world, so they can't tell the difference between what is fiction and what isn't. Conspiracies to generate conspiracies is just marketing, and boy is it good marketing. It is great marketing at the moment, and I only wish it is one of those things where it's like I wish I was evil and I had come up with this earlier. Someone, and I should mean a bunch of people, made a ton of money off of it. I mean, there was that I saw the sort of like the little meme a few days ago of there were like two young African American guys selling sweatshirts to the people in the nation's capital on the 6th for $100 a pop, and somebody tried to, hey Eric, and someone tried to interview them, and they were just like, fuck off. They were like, go away. So what's your name? The guy just said nah, and so the interviewer referred to that guy as nah, and said nah said. Yeah, and he said, do you believe any of this? Nah says, of course not, but these people are putting me through college. I wish I was evil. Every fascist? Well, I'm only kind of fascist, so I'm only kind of evil. And I actually get called evil a lot, so maybe I am evil. I'm gonna have to go with that. I'd have trouble denying being evil. What are those, like, alignment charts? I'm sort of, like, there's chaotic evil. I'm, like, somewhere between chaotic neutral and chaotic evil. So sometimes I'm just neutral, sometimes I'm evil. Sometimes, but like I'm more chaotic than any of that stuff. The fascists just are evil. They're just boring, really. Okay, but continuing. A third puzzle to consider is what we... I wish I were... A third puzzle to consider is what we would call the writer's paradox, in which a character within a novel sits down to write the novel we are presently reading. Subjunctive mood today, yeah. This device resembles the reader's paradox in that it produces a regressive effect, and that it resembles the speaker's paradox in that the writer can now comment on the truth or falsity of the novel he is writing. But this paradox can be answered in the same way as our other two paradoxes. The writer's reference to the novel will not be self-referenced, and consequently what the writer says about the novel will not be contradictory. Again, okay, so this is kind of, again, this is another way to slice this. It's saying, look, I'm writing this book, and in this book I'm going to write about myself writing this book. But you are inherently reading it after the fact. And so the fact that it's after the fact means it's not actually self-referencing itself, it's referencing the final product, which is something that happened after the fact. You're not referencing the exact same thing, you're referencing some later product. This book we are reading now is what is really being referenced in the book. It's I'm writing about the book that is already finished, which is not the self-reference of them writing at the time that they're writing about themselves writing. So this is as opposed to what world are we in, this is what time slice are we in that we're referring to the book. What is the time index? So it's not the world index, this is the time index. That's what the author's saying here. This is a recursive thing, so it's not reflexive. So, but like you're referring to a further thing along in time, and so therefore it's not going to be paradoxical because it's like, well, I can refer to myself in the future, like future me thinks this. Well, are we gonna? I mean, you could be right or you could be wrong about that, but it's not a paradox, and that's kind of what this is saying. It's like when the writer writes themselves about themselves writing, they are sort of like making up what the final product's gonna be, but they don't know that. But of course, that's okay. You can write about yourself writing, and then when it's done, it's done. But at the time of the writing, you weren't referring to the actual final product because you didn't have it yet. And so that's a thing. And so instead of being a world at, so this is the at of a world, because what world are we in? It's either the in-book world or the in-the-fiction world versus the meat-space real world. And this at over here, what at are we in over here, it's indexed with a T. It's like what time slice are we in? Is the book even finished yet? Because if you have to be referring to yourself at the same time, not to actually get a full self-referential paradox. Okay. A significant variation of the writer's paradox is one we might call the author's paradox. This occurs when an author seems to inhabit a realm half in and half out of his novel, creating it and discussing as he goes along, or else commenting on it as it creates itself. We see this technique in Barth as well as in works of Donald Barthel. So lots of Barthers here. Here the writer can speak from within his work and from the special vantage point give us a running commentary on the reality of his fiction, or if he chooses, the fictiveness of reality. So, okay, so the author has basically, this is more of like you've iterated your book, you wrote the book, and then as you wrote the book, you went back and added notes to the book, and then called that the final book. Now, is there any paradox there? Not necessarily. It's like you've just gone through the book twice, and then the final book is really the two run-throughs that you did the first time, and then it's like as you go back and you edit it to create itself. Is it really paradoxical? No, because you went back and you've like sort of modified what was going on at the time. So again, this is sort of again a modified. This is like a combination of the world and the time. Where are you? Because you've changed both what world you're in. Sometimes you're inside the fiction. Sometimes you're the writer. Sometimes you're, and then what time are you in? Is it done yet, or are you commenting on how it's getting done? But even then, it's happening afterwards. I don't know this person. Are they good at this sort of writing? I don't know. Okay. So yeah, if you have any questions, again, feel free to ask because it does get a little complicated here. All right. Halfway through Snow White, Barthelme provides his readers with a questionnaire to be filled out about the novel. The implications that's funny. The implications of this authorial intrusion are many, including a suggestion that our answers could in some way change the outcome of the story. Do you like the story so far? Yes, no. In the further development of the story, would you like to see more emotion or less emotion? He also inserts questions that lead us in our interpretation of the story. Have you understood in reading to this point that Paul is the prince figure? Yes, no. That Jane is the wicked stepmother figure? Yes, no. Of course, the questions are meant to be funny. Nevertheless, they do point the direction the author thinks he is going in his work. How is the reader to respond to these directions, especially if she finds herself disagreeing with the author? Okay, so this isn't even self-creating the work. This is in some sense this is interpreting for the reader how it's to be read by forcing them to make certain distinctions going on as they're writing. So this is sort of a self-reference on the reader, not actually in the story. So this is how the reader's interpreting the story. So I would actually call this one a little bit different. So this is not just the author commenting on how the book is being developed. This is how the reader is interpreting the book. So this is actually a slightly different one right here. Okay. I point out here that authorial comments made within the novel are not by their nature performatives. That is to say, in a novel that you have produced, an effect is not the same as actually producing that effect. Yeah. So just because you do something, it's not the same as in a novel that you have produced an effect is not the same as actually producing the effect. So saying that you do it is not the same as producing it. Manet is amazing. His seventh function of the language is a romp into hilarious, self-aware semioticians hunting for the clues about the death of Roland Barthes. He died after having lunch with Francois Mitterrand. That part is true. Hit by a laundry truck. Oh, I forgot. I knew that there was somebody in this area that was just like hit by a truck. That's always so like anticlimactic or something. But the novel starts with that and its education about semiotics itself, hilarious and high intelligentness and stuff. Okay, that sounds like a good time. Yeah. I forgot, like, some people, like, he was the one that got hit by a truck. I mean, some people die from, like, brain aneurysms, but, like, you're just, like, there's, like, these great authors, and they just, like, take a wrong step and get hit by a car, and you're like, oh, well, it happens. Although I think the best story, although he wasn't young, was, what was it, Van Heyenort, who is a logician. Van Heyenort died in a murder-suicide by, like, his fourth ex-wife or something. So, like, she had, like, come, like, he was professor of logic somewhere, and she came and killed him and killed herself. And the whole story is that he had a secret sensitive document that tells this new function of language. They never find it. That's the point. The absence of the function is the most motivating. Yeah, he knew something, and everyone's trying to get it. So it's a mystery. Yeah. Okay. Furthermore, the claim by an author within a novel to have written the novel is not a true statement about the novel, because the novel is the statement along with the others contained in it. Yeah, it's inside the novel. This is the what world are you at? This is in the novel. So it's in the world. And so it's only true, if it's true in our world, that doesn't mean it's true in the novel world. Well, she did it in the logical order. It's not for nothing. Well, yeah. It would be hard to murder suicide by suiciding first, but maybe not impossible. I mean, I guess if you shot through yourself first and then hit the other person, it could work, but still. Yeah. The determination of the full meaning of a statement in a novel must be made within the novel, and therefore cannot be made about the novel. The author in this case cannot properly be said to refer to the novel because he solely exists within the novel. Yeah. Who is speaking, and where are they speaking? From what perspective? In the novel or in the outside world? This is the Polish way. Van Hayenort was French, I believe. And was his... I can't remember like where his wife was from. Oh, too soon? Whatever. An extension of the author's paradox is what we might call the second... An extension of the author's paradox is what we might call the secondary author's paradox, whereby the reader of a digitized text is invited to choose the direction of the story will go, or is given an opportunity to continue the story herself. Obviously, the secondary author could avail himself of any of the self-referential devices mentioned above, and in those cases the paradox is... Yeah, I got it. A second too late there, synesemiotics. I'm sorry. Like, you got the Polish notation. And in those cases, paradoxes would be answered in the same way. The difference here is that the secondary author is contributing to a novel that is open-ended. As a result, one cannot determine what the truth conditions of the text are, since any subsequent sentence would subvert the conditions already laid down. If a reader adds the sentence, the use of self-referential devices in this novel is merely a trick and does not call into question the truth conditions of the novel, is just that statement, now part of the novel, true or false. We cannot say. Just as with any other logical equation, a truth value cannot be established until the equation is complete. Yeah, so it's like when, this is one of these when is the statement being made. I'll polish my jokes. Very funny. This is one of these, this is the when is the statement being made. If the statement is being made before the book is done, then again, you're not referring to the finished text, and therefore it's not really referring to the same thing. You're referring to the first half of the book is referring to like the completed book, and so it's not self-referential because it's not the same self. Okay. The common and decisive factor in all of the literary paradoxes I have considered so far is the matter of self-reference. Indeed, the crux of the liar's paradox is its self-referentiality, and the liar's paradox, despite its name, is not essentially concerned with lying. It's a semantic paradox. In order for someone to feel the paradoxicality of the speaker's situation when he says, "I am lying," one must intensify to an unnatural degree the self-referentiality of the utterance. After all, when someone says, "I am lying," that usually means that some other statement is untrue, not that the present one is. It is doubtful that one could actually lie by speaking self-referentially, and this is especially so when the self-referential statement is, "I am lying." As C.L. Hamblin puts it, what is openly stated to be false is not, in the large view, a falsehood. Okay, Sinesemiak says, but hey, wait, you're missing something important when you describe it in such a linear fashion. The book is actually only written all at once because it's being filled in roll of the time of building that isn't finished. So I think we need to re-examine the role of time and the nature of a story when storytelling versus when writing. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, the reason I glossed it because it was basically a different version of the same thing that was said above. Is that if the book is not complete, then the book is not complete at that time, and you're talking about temporally different things. Now, it was not complete because it was on the is on the reader to actually do the completion, and so they had part authorship of the story. Now, does that actually matter for the liar's paradox? No. Now, I mean, it's an interesting wrinkle in what kind of self-reference is going on, but I glossed it because it wasn't actually once you break the self-referentiality, it didn't matter what kind of break it was. But yeah, you're right that I didn't go through that as as detailed as I could, but I felt because it was just again, either it was a part of whose world and whose time, and then the other one, the third one here, that they were saying when with these questions, this is who's the author and exactly when is it happening. But I think this is more of a meta story going on than the actual self-referentiality. Is who's doing the reading versus what voice. Actually, to be fair, this is an important point. What is the voice speaking? Like, so the at here of this is the speaker's voice, and that actually does matter. You're right, this is more important. So Roland Barthes says the author is always dead, meaning they aren't the same person when they come back and revise stuff a year after starting. You see, but I was just taking that as a temporal one. Now, who is the speaker? Like, so is it first person or third person? And that is also a good point. I was taking it just before, in some sense, as being a version of the temporal, like, because the book wasn't done yet, and in that case it happened to be because it's a choose your own adventure. The person reading had to make a decision, and that's why it was not done yet, because it was they had to choose their own adventure, and so self-referentiality does not apply because the book is not complete. Now, to be fair, then this is just who is the speaker's voice also matters, because if you're talking about I'm lying versus I'm lying but about something else, or I'm lying but like the I speaking is not actually referring to me, it's like I'm quoting somebody else, then yeah, then the paradox, the self-referentiality doesn't hold. So that's a fair point. Yeah. Where was I though? So, but the question is, there is a third thing to be said there. Very few people are actually making that point. I don't think the author is making that point here. In writing, the author is not as much on the hook, not bound prior statements, because as a writer they can go back and change what happened. In oral tradition, it's harder to make U-turns in narrative because it's live. Yeah. So in that sense, if you're getting the person reading to say something like, I'm reading I'm lying, but I know I'm quoting somebody else, like if I was just, like when I say this right here, that's what the quotes are doing. I can say I'm lying all day, but I know I'm quoting, so I don't feel like I'm contradicting myself. Now, yeah, it's harder, but if you're clear about when you're quoting somebody versus when you're actually saying something from your perspective, it's not really a problem. It is harder, but like you have to be, as long as you're careful, it's not usually that difficult to say, well, look, I'm quoting somebody else when I say this, versus I'm not quoting, I'm saying it from my own perspective. And like I was saying, I don't actually think what the author was saying was what I was just saying, that you have to be super careful about the position from which the assertion is being made. It's the world, so because you're referring to the novel because he exists within the novel. This isn't what world you exist within. That's what they were saying up here. And then this one here, this very much is the Trump thing. Yeah, you have to get like in the world of the QAnon and the Trump mindset, then you will understand what they're doing. And what's it called? Then here is the reader adds a sentence. The use of the self-referential device in this novel is not merely a trick and does not call into question the truth of the condition. Is that statement now part of the novel, true or false? Okay, so again, this is being written in the novel, and so you just can't say, it can't be established when it's in the book and as it's being done. This is not actually calling into the position of who is speaking. This is calling into the position of where the novel exists if it's being made in a choose-your-own-adventure story. So yeah, you have to be careful about what is sliding under your feet. He literally demands that the past be reconceived even though he can't rewrite it temporally. He knows nobody is really looking, and so I mean Trump's person is fiction. No, that's exactly in sin of semiotics. He's in some sort of weird like bubble where he says is just like it can be true, and that's okay. And then as long as people go along with him, all of them together, it's all like true for them. And so when he refers to stuff, it's like it's only within that sort of like fictional world that he exists in. I mean, there's been stories for many, many years that all the lawyers he deals with record all their lawyer conversations with him because he can't be trusted to abide by any agreement that you made with him, and so everything has to be taped. You have to be like, no, I have it on tape, and that's why there's all these tapes came out. Like Cohen says, there's all these tapes that may come out, but he had a few of them because everyone knew you couldn't trust him because he lives in his own world. And so you have to be this is the thing. So it's like yeah. All right. There's a reason. All right. So what is openly stated to be false is not, in the larger view, a falsehood. Yeah. So if I say I'm lying, I usually mean I'm lying about something else, not what I'm saying right now. There is a reason for this. Contrary to popular belief, when telling a lie, one does not necessarily state what is factually false. Rather, lies express what the liar merely believes to be false. Naturally, one's belief that something is false cannot make it false. To assume so would be to attribute a kind of infallibility to the liar, whereby he could infallibly state what is not the case. As this would be impossible, we are forced to look elsewhere for the nature of a lie. We find it not in the realm of facts, but in the realm of beliefs. I don't know. This is sort of like some overly heavy metaphysics here. I mean, sure, you think someone tells you a lie, they know it's false. Yeah, well, there's reasons there's no reeling people back. There's no reeling people back because they get tied up in it. And why are they tied up in it? Well, that's complicated. Why people get like tied up in anything. So yeah. But I've been reading some stuff about this. I'm sure everybody has. Well, Gödel, that's getting way more complicated. But people get their whole like lives, like this becomes their friends and everything like that. And if they leave that, they'll have no friends, they'll have no business, all of it. So it gets very hard. All right. You don't state necessarily what is false. Yeah, you kind of do. You do half truths and all this stuff. And rather, lies express what the liar merely believes to be false. No, yeah. Factually false? No, because if they were stating what was factually false, then they would be stating something that was true, that it was false. Like if they were saying this is false when the thing was actually false, that's a true statement. That they were saying something else is false. So this is a funky paragraph. I'm not in love with it, but yeah, they are saying something that they believe to be true. They're saying that it's false. Sure, that's all it is. Lies are not necessarily. Yeah, he did. He did not solve the liar's paradox. No. You could even argue that he generalized the liar's paradox. There is no solution to the liar's paradox. There are many solutions to the liar's paradox. You can take your pick, and it's more like pick your poison. That's all it is. There is no solution to the liar's paradox. You pick your poison. And all of them have their benefits and problems. So that's what it is. Wittgenstein definitely did not solve the liar's paradox. I actually don't even know if Wittgenstein talked about the liar's paradox, really. Metalanguage is the way to resolve it. It's not a paradox, really. Again, that's one way to pick your poison. There are more than one way to do it. I said at the beginning, I do actually know something about this topic. I'm not an expert, but this is a topic I do know a little bit more about. There are many ways to go about this. And I was talking about them, I think, before you were here. But yeah, you can go the meta-language way. You can go dialethic. You can just accept things are true and false at the same time. You can go gappy and say these things have neither true nor false logical values. You can do a lot of stuff. I mean, Bubba Bloop? Yeah, well, I'm always lying. Redeem, cancel world. I can't say lying. Oh my god. Alright. Fibbing. It's going to be fibbing. Cheers. Alright. And so, for those who don't know, cancel world is one of my point redeem things. That means I can't really say the word anymore. I mean, this is going to be hard because I'm reading, but hey, what are we going to do? Alright, for example, suppose you look at your watch and establish the belief, I thought it was by naming sentences with symbols and the idea is that only the meta language counts. Yeah, but then the question is, what is the fibbing paradox? Because if I say I'm fibbing right now, those are all compatible though. Yeah, well, you've had the naming sentences with symbols and the idea that only the meta language counts. The question is then, what is meta language? Because you can always refer to other things. That's not counting as meta language, referring to other statements. You can always quote something. You can always say that thing I just said. Is that meta language? I mean, you don't need symbols. You're just referring back to that. You don't need any formal machinery to do that. That's why the Cretan paradox works so well, unless you want to call being Cretan a formal property, but I doubt that. You say, well, look, being a Cretan, all Cretans are liars. You don't need symbols, and it doesn't require talking about language at that point. You're talking about Cretans. And so those are all compatible, but like you can't get out of it that easy. You can't. There's something called revenge paradoxes, where what happens is you take the idea that you use to get yourself out of the paradox, and you can actually turn that on itself. And quite often, if you use one of these sort of meta language things, then you regenerate the paradox at the meta language level. And then at the meta language level, you try to get out of it again, you can regenerate the paradox again by saying, like, ever more sophisticated ways of self-reference that you can say what you're saying is false. Then you say at the meta language, everything I say is false. Doggy. What is that? Ooh, it's like animated. That's cool. It's a cute doggy. Oh, that's a bit. Thank you for the bit. I was like, how'd that get animated? That's amazing. Thank you for the bit. I'm very confused about Twitch still. Yeah. Woo, a bit. Thank you. I gotta get some like explosions on screen, but yeah, fireworks. All right. Where was I? For example, suppose that you look at your watch. Did I hear about PogChamp? You mean Komodo hype? Isn't that Gödel? Math is a closed system. Yes, that is one of the things about math, is that you can do self-reference in that. Yeah, and that is one of the reasons it works in Bob Ross. That's one of the reasons why Gödel could do what he did in his paradox. In some sense, he created the self-referential thing, the self-referentiality about the proof system in mathematics, and saying instead of saying it is fibbing, it's like the not telling the truth. What it's saying is that it cannot be proved. Instead of using truth or the semantics of truth, it's using the semantics of provability. And by using provability, he was able to regenerate the paradox within the mathematical formalism. So, because you can, in some sense, there's correlations. Well, what can be proved and what is true, and therefore you get a very similar sort of setup. But that's why he didn't solve anything. He more or less generalized the semantic paradoxes to the mathematical systems. But it's definitely not solved. If anything, he widened their scope. Okay. For example, suppose that you look at your watch and establish the belief that time is 2:15, but you tell me that it is 2:15 because you want to get rid of me. You have fibbed by asserting that what is contrary to your belief, but your statement may or may not be factually false. Your watch could be slow, so that could be the correct time. actually is a quarter after 2. You have conveyed a true fact, but you have uttered a falsehood all the same. Well, no, you did not utter a falsehood, you uttered a fib. And this is fair. You have to, the person does have to believe what they're saying is not correct when they are fibbing. Damn you, Bubba Bloop. If lies are contrary to belief but not fact, then there could be no, I have to read it here, no fibber's paradox as it is commonly conceived. Wait, if lies are contrary to belief but not to fact, then there could be no fibber's paradox as it is commonly conceived. That is, the paradox known as the fibber's paradox is a paradox of reference and not of lying. No, see, I don't agree with this. It's a semantics. It's what does the word mean? And it's not the word itself if it's contrary to belief. See, the problem here is this is getting itself tied up. Fibbing, the paradoxes have to do with the meanings of the words. The fibber's paradox, drink water. The fibber's paradox, it has to do with the meaning of what it is to fib. It does not have to do, and that happens to matter to belief, but that does not mean that there are no paradoxes, there are no other paradoxes. And so it doesn't actually matter that what you believe all the time. It's like, it just matters that it is semantically self-referenced. Is that another bit, semiotics? Thank you for the bit. I appreciate it. I think you are now the bits leader. With like your 2 bits. Okay, that is the paradox known as the fibber's paradox, is the paradox of reference and not of law. Keep doing that. Right there. In ordinary speech, to say I am fibbing is to assert that you believe you have told an untruth. But as we've seen, it does not follow that you have told an untruth. Even if, no, that's true. You could have told the truth, but you didn't know it, or you thought you weren't. Even if we were to consider the statement I am fibbing to refer to the speaker's present act of stating I am fibbing, the contradiction, if there is one, would only be one of one's beliefs and not of facts. Thus, we could translate the self-referential I am fibbing into something like, I do not believe in the sincerity of my words, or I do not know what I believe. But these, of course, are not the assertion of any kind of fact. I don't know what it is, but it's fun. What, the bits, or me being... What, about this stuff? I don't know what you don't know. Yeah, let me know. I'd like to explain. The cancel a word maybe is that I'm not allowed to say that word anymore. I'm going to put a time limit on that, like a 10-minute block, but I don't know. I haven't got a 10-minute block on here yet. Yay, 100 bits. Thank you. Okay. Let's see, I'm not sure I believe this. Because... So, and even so, what does it matter if it's a paradox of belief? It's still a logical paradox. Now, you're saying the author here is saying it's the target of it is not the truth or falsity, but it's the truth or falsity of the belief. Then that's okay. You can still talk about the truth or falsity of beliefs. That's all right, because you're not even you're saying it's not a fact in the world. Well, no, it's a fact about what your bits. Those are money. You're sending me money. You do realize that like a bit is 1 cent. That's sending me money. I mean, don't be sending me money if you don't mean to be sending me money. Like, how do you... Bit to IT... It's bits. Yeah, it's this one. I just call them bits. You gave me $1. Yeah, $1.02. I mean... I hope you're not going to, like, starve because of that. I don't know how to even refund them. I will refund them if you'd like. Biddies. Yeah, some people call them biddies, before... Oh, I can't say the word? No. The fact... I'll take it. You got more, bro. Alright. Yeah, so I don't agree with this paragraph of the author's because His chicken money. Because I do not believe in the sincerity of the words. That's not what you're saying when you say I am fibbing. That could be straight up a true or false statement about the. You should ban the word thanks so we can't thank you when you give them bits. I do not believe in the sincerity of my words. Why does this have to always be about belief? I just don't see that. It could be about the fact of the beliefs. It could be about the world. Why are you forcing someone to always be in the belief just because you're saying you can't have a contradiction in the world, but just saying that it's like this just seems a little ad hoc right here. It does not follow your truth. If you're saying I'm fibbing to refer to the speaker's present act of saying you're fibbing, the contradiction, what else would it be? It would only be of beliefs of facts. So you're only allowed to talk about your beliefs. Why? Why can't you even talk about the fact of your beliefs? Because this is what I was talking about, the revenge paradox before. You could say, well, it's a fact that I am unsincere about what I believe. Well, wouldn't that also be a paradox then? Because then you're referring to the way you believe in this sort of belief way, but then you've just regenerated the paradox by saying that your beliefs are somehow mistaken, and then you've just regenerated a semantic paradox on the meaning of belief. Truth values are assigned only by belief for analysis. Yeah, but the thing is, you can just then go up the level. Like, can't you just then say, all right, you're assigned to belief, but then can't you just refer to your beliefs at that point? And then you have to do the same thing again. So instead of talking about the world, then you talk about your beliefs in terms of what you believe and what you don't believe and how that works. So I don't think you're going to get out of the paradox this way, because you could probably... a predicate? All right, so you're doing the meta language thing. An axiom? Again, but then you're going to get yourself into the Gödelian thing, where you can start using your structures against you in terms of the semantics of these things. So if you're saying you're doing the formal structure here. If you're doing the formal structure, you're just going to be able to turn the formal structure on itself and refer to itself again. And if you're saying, well, you can't get out of the meta language, well, that's the whole point. It's just you're always be able to go up a level and refer to itself using whatever meta language you are. And if you say you can't go anymore, well, then if you say you can't go any farther up, that's an ad hoc saying, well, that's the end of it. And now, you can do that. Everyone does that. But does that again, this is one way to bite the bullet. I mean, you say, look, you're only talking about belief here. You're not actually talking about the way facts are in the world. But then you're never talking about the way facts are in the world. This is sort of like the nuclear option. It says, when I say I'm fibbing, I'm not actually talking about what's going on anymore. I'm only talking about my beliefs. But that also means when I say that about anything, that means I'm not actually talking about the way things are. I'm talking about my beliefs. Yeah, turtles all the way down, of course. Turtles with virgins. So that's the thing. This is actually going nuclear. It's calling you never talk about the world. You're only talking about your own beliefs. And no one really would accept that. I don't think anyone accepts that. I've seen this before. I just didn't pick it up on it quickly enough. But why would anyone say all of a sudden, or only in this case, when I'm saying a self-referential semantic paradox, well, I'm not actually talking about that anymore. I'm talking about my beliefs. Yeah. All right, continuing. The conclusion that we can draw from this is that many types of non-paradoxical and self-referential statements exist that can be used in literature and that will indirectly comment on the speaker's beliefs in his own words. In regards to the status of one's belief, the classic example of the liar's paradox, I am fibbing, can be shown to be essentially the same as statements such as, my words mean nothing, I have no reason to speak, I can make no sense out of anything, I have nothing to say. Think of the applications of this for authors and their fictional narrators. Well, no, see, there's a lot of hay to be made here, sure. But yeah, these are all different ways to refer to itself. And that's okay. These can all be semantically self-referential, and that's kind of the issue. Now, is it going to be as clean cut as the original paradox? No. But, is that really a problem? I don't think so. I think the problem remains. Now, again, if the problem doesn't remain here, why then does it actually remain in, does it exist in the original is the question. And I think that's kind of the problem this author has here. I don't think, hey Evan, what's up? I don't think the author here actually understands that a lot of what they're saying about ways to get out of it, of paradoxes for the literature crowd, can also be referred back to the original paradox and be applied there. Because the author said some stuff above saying, well, look, this is sort of like the canonical paradox. No, all these things that we talk about self-referential paradoxes. That's exactly what we're talking about. There's a paper, Literary Self-Reference, 5 Types of Liars Paradox by David Lehner. But I think that Sin of Semiotics says, but I think the bigger point is that these paradoxes actually appear everywhere and are unavoidable in every mundane questions, and as a logician, it's necessary to find a way to resolve them, I think. Well, that is kind of the point also, yeah. Suspension of disbelief is required to navigate even the real world. That's fair. But what's going on, what I was saying is you have to be able to navigate these things. Because usually that's, but what I was saying is that, look, you'd have to understand exactly what the paradox is to begin with. The author sort of takes the classical line on the paradox and says, well, this is all the ways literature can get out of them. The author, I don't think, quite grasps all the ways that the original paragraph paradox can be attacked using all the things they're saying here. These are kind of this is a nice paper, but a lot of this stuff is kind of known in sort of the logic literature as different ways to attack the paradox. And so the paradox is not as, you're not escaping the paradox. It doesn't actually get you away from the paradox. These are just ways to talk about the paradox. The paradox does not disappear, even in the face of all these things that have been said in this paper. And so, yes, you can go this way in all these ways, but that doesn't, you're not getting rid of it. You just ain't. Because all these things, you can translate this into the formal logic, and then you can regenerate the paradox out of the formal logic of these things. You're just tweaking the predicate symbols. That's it. But you're still going to get the paradox. Okay. By broadening the Fibber's paradox in this way, we find that such statements can indeed play an important role in literary dialogue. Oh yeah, and I apologize, I can't say this word right here anymore because it was channel point reward is I can't say a word anymore. Thank you, Bubba Blue. So that's why I'm calling it the Fibber's paradox. So, you're no expert, but on Gödel's incompleteness theorem, I don't know if this related to paradox, blows my goddamn mind. Yes, it is related. I was talking about that a little bit before we got here. In some sense, the Gödel's incompleteness can be seen as a translation of the semantic paradoxes, of the truth, semantic paradox, into proof theory. And so it's saying, instead of it says, this statement is neither true, well, I'm going to say I'll say it so I can be clear for Evan. Instead of saying, I am lying right now, saying this statement is unprovable right now. And that's what, in some sense, is the parallel between the semantic paradox and the Gödel's incompleteness. In Gödel's original paper, Gödel actually referenced the Richard paradox, which is a slightly different version of these paradoxes. But Gödel actually referred back to an old version of the semantic paradoxes, of which we've been discussing in this paper. So yeah, that's right. Okay. So we find that such statements, the halting problem, yeah, that also comes back to the self-reference too. We also were discussing that a little earlier. The author brought that up. As they do in the works of Samuel Beckett. The appeal of such statements, however, will be primarily to the conditions of human belief. This allows us to say that when characters in fictional work question the frame of their fictionality, this questioning may reveal some uncertainty as to the status of beliefs about the world, but not about the reality of that world itself. Thus, an author who characteristically uses such devices would be saying to his readers that he does not know what to believe, or perhaps that personal, cultural, or political factors pertain that prevent him from saying what he believes. Again, I don't like this line from this author that saying when we're talking, we're only talking about what we believe. What we believe. I think that's a little bit of not the right way to go here, but I can appreciate that. See, I think the author here is a little stuck on the classical worldview that the contradictions are terrible, and so in some sense they have to go very hard to avoid contradictions in like the logic. But again, why would we always say then we're never talking about the real world anymore? And we do talk about the real world. That's kind of like what we do most of the time. We don't think we're talking about what we believe. So, okay. Oh, we're almost done. Cool. When confronted with a self-referential device in a literary work, we would begin to analyze the author's total communicative act along the same lines that we would analyze any other disruption in communication. The dynamics would employ in the analysis of a lie, for example, an attitude towards belief, a sense of probability, a motive for a deliberate action, a level of self-awareness and awareness of the content of other minds, a feeling of moral responsibility, and so on, would all come into play. The author of a self-referential work may mean many things by his employment of this mode, or nothing. The determination of meaning, however, will have to come from within the work itself. It will not call into question the nature of reality, but only the author's beliefs about that reality. Okay, this is a fun paper. I had some problems with it, but like I said, this is a topic I know a bit more about, so I'm gonna have like more to say about it, and usually something critical because I'm gonna have my own opinions. But for the most part, this was a lot of fun. So where did we start off? Okay, so it's like again, a lot of self-reference happens in writing, and exactly what world do we exist in when we're talking about fiction? That's really what's going on here. Now, there were three ways we were talking about, at least three ways we were talking about getting out of fiction. One of them was you're saying, look, when someone says something self-referential in a fiction book, then that only exists in that fictional world, not in the actual world, so it doesn't really matter to us. Then what happens, you start to screw with that a little bit. You say, well, look, then the author can self-refer to themselves. Not just the characters in the book, the author, and then you can also get the reader involved in the choose-your-own adventure sort of things. And this is the and so where is the metafictional mode? What's going on in this sort of like level above the fiction? And so that's what we get down to with, here we go. So we get into the sort of the definition of the paradox. It needs to be self-referential. I do want to mention earlier the three things that they said before. What was it? It's contradictory, reversible, and self-referential. This reversibility thing confused me, and I'm sorry about that earlier. It never got brought up again because I don't think it has anything to do with anything, and I think it was just confused. But yeah. It's contradictory and self-referential, though you have to get a contradiction and it has to refer to itself. That's what a semantic paradox does. So once you got a little clearer on semantic paradoxes, which is what happened here, then we got down to the ways in which it is paradoxical. And this is where I started to have some issues, because they say, look, it's not logical because it's in a literary technique. No. Just because it's in a book of literature or in a fiction does not mean they're not using like our logic. So it could be logical. Just because it says it's sequential in a literary technique, no, it could also. Woo! It says it. See, this is so annoying. It doesn't actually show the animation. Where's my animation? It says it did it. I don't see it. Anyway. Hopefully you guys saw something. I didn't see none. Thank you, Cinesemiotics. I appreciate that. So yeah. So what I was saying was, just because it's in a book of literature does not mean you're not talking about the actual logic here. Like why? Why would it? So it says it's not completely self-referential and consequently does not produce contradiction. Well, why isn't that completely self-referential? It would seem that the mere existence of a character, changing voice, viewpoint, whatever, that doesn't matter. None of that matters. You could still do the paradox. You can still do it. Just because there's a lot of details to work out, that doesn't mean the logic isn't there. Okay, then I come back and I think the author did a good job in this area. What are the ways in which you can get out of the liar's paradox? And there's a few different ways, like 3 big ways basically. You have a different world, so you're saying, look, what they're saying is in the fictional world doesn't apply to our world. That's fine. So it's like you're saying, well, this statement is false, what I'm saying right now. But if when I said that I was actually referring to in the book, then of course I can say this statement is false because the statement I'm saying right here is meant to be the book one. You can also do it in time. This statement is false, but I was referring to something in the past, not in the book, in a different world, but at a different point in time. So if the book isn't finished yet, this is kind of what they were saying. And then also, you have to be careful about who the I is, the speaker. And I think the author kind of waved at this, but also who is the reader, who is the author, and so you have to be careful about that. I think this area could have been a little bit cleaner, but I think I like what they did also. This is sort of the way that they did it was like who is the author, and it was sort of the more literary version of this. So as a Cinesemiotic says, the Roland Barthes, death of the author. So yeah, you have to be careful who is doing the speaking too. So when there's an I in the text, who is actually speaking, and if it's not who you think it is, then there's maybe no paradox because it's not self-referential to the person you think it is to. Get a tattoo that reads in Korean, this space intentionally left blank. Yeah, you want to know what really annoys me? All the times that a book says this page is intentionally blank, no, it should say this is all that is meant to be on this page. Why can't they just say that? All that is meant to be on this page is, this is all that is meant to be on this page. That's what they should say. It takes up the same amount of room. The space intentionally left blank is not blank. It should say this is all that is meant to be on this page. Completely with you. But of course, what's his name was way ahead of us with the je ne sais pas, this is not a pipe. The art, the Duchamp, I believe. What was it, Duchamp? This is not a pipe. So he was the first out of the gate with that one. And I like how you got it. It says it reads in Courier New Year. You specify the typeface. Very nice. Yeah, so this is not a pipe. And it says this is not a pipe under the painting of the pipe. But is that actually text or is that a painting of text? Does the text actually mean what it says it means in our world? Or is it in the world of the pipe? And if it's in the world of the pipe, then it is a pipe in the world of the pipe. But if we're reading it in our world, then it is not a pipe because it's the painting of the pipe. And then it checks some. Okay. Yeah. So you can get the this is not a pipe. Like the question is where is the text that this is not a pipe? Where does that text exist? Is it in the world where the pipe exists because it's painted in the same sort of like pipe? Yes, Magritte. Sorry. Where does that text exist? If it's for us, then it would be more like a label outside the painting. But it's not. It's in the painting. And so then it would be referring to the pipe in the painting, but then in the painting it is a pipe. And so therefore you get the exact same problem in the history of painting art as being discussed here. So it's the semantics of where is the what is the painting? What is the viewing of the painting? Where is the art? What counts as the art? Is it the interaction of the person? Is it the, what is the scene of the art? So this all sort of recapitulates in 20th century painting. Fun of other things. Yeah, you got yourself your little first, too. Yeah, there's only a few of those left. So jump on them, people. Alright, so what else has we got? Okay, yeah, I disagreed with this sort of stuff about the belief. I think, is that what we're discussing here? Yeah. Alright, this is the author call. What's it called? Choose your own story. So when is the book actually finished? So what are we actually referring to? And so it's like you're referring to something that is not yet complete, but then you're not referring to the same thing because you're not referring to the statement you're making right then. You're referring to some future object, but that doesn't seem to be a problem. Okay. Now we're talking the belief. I don't like this option. But again, you can go this way. You can say we never actually talk about the real world. You can do a whole podcast on one painting. Yeah, it's a fascinating painting. It's great. Um, so yeah, go for it if you want to. But like yeah, it's good. So yeah, so here's a question: do you really want to say we don't actually talk about the real world? Is that what you want to say? That's what he's saying here. We're only talking about our beliefs. It doesn't seem right. But like, yeah. Okay. So, let's see. Is there anything else I have to say? Yeah, so I don't. This is all the belief stuff. I don't buy this part, but that's alright. You can do that if you want. Okay, so, again, why is this happening in a book? A lot of reasons. Is it going to cause a paradox? Sometimes I'd say. Not always, and there's a lot of ways out of it. Again, pick your poison, my friends. Pick your poison. You're not actually going to get rid of the semantic paradoxes. Just not happening. We're not that clever. But you can talk, like, the reason it's happening in a book, and this author described a bunch of the ways in which these things happen. People read books about themselves. The author refers to the reader involves himself in the book and choose your own adventure stories, a lot of these things. So how does that work? Now, that all affects the self-referentiality. You can do Kant says you can do a whole podcast on Magritte. That's amazing. Yeah, fascist, I know. So, again, this is a nice paper discussing. I don't agree with all the analysis of paradox, but the analysis of the literature and the ways in which it interacts is nice. I think that's good. So this was nice for that reason. Yeah, and that's it. So here's the references. Yeah, so we got So as opposed to the painful logical stuff I end up reading on this stuff, you end up these are the cases. Actually, kind of like having this list right here, because I think there's a good list to get some nice references for this topic. So yeah, you guys have any more questions about this? I mean, I think I've said most of everything I want to say. Huh. Yeah. How long have I been going? Oh, it's almost 2 hours. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, this is where you start to realize that you are a part of the fiction. And then you get yourself confused. Are we part of the fiction that is being written? And sort of the great delusion that is in the United States at the moment. Like you imagine a character who happens to be a novelist who begins to question his own reality in relation to the fictional world he creates. Are we all in Donald Trump's illusion at the moment? We might be. You know, that's a really sad thought. Might we all just be delusions in Donald Trump's world? Perhaps. So what the... Sure. Okay, cool. Okay, so let's see. Is there anything else need to get done today? Thank you for reading papers so I don't have to. You're welcome. You're welcome. It's fun to discuss papers, like fun papers. So it's good. Let me know. Yep, I do take suggestions and things from chat and other viewers. So please let me know If you want anyone else wants something read, it's usually academic philosophy, so I don't read random stuff. But if you want me to read academic philosophy, I'd probably read academic philosophy. But yeah, so that's it for now. Maybe I'll just play some Minesweeper or something. What time is it? Oh dear, it's like 10:30. Um, let's see. Is anyone else online at the moment? Maybe I'll go see if anyone to raid real quick. It's all the same people usually. Nope. Okay. Okay. Cool. Okay, well, in that case, I hope everyone has a great night, and stay safe out there. To Marshall, I like this paper and wish I could disagree with it, what you said, but later. Yeah, this is a very complicated topic, actually. Because the logicians worry about this, the literature people worry about this. It comes up in ancient philosophy, it comes up in medieval philosophy, so a lot of people... I smooth brain most of the time. But, yeah. So thank you, everyone, for being here, and have a great and safe night, and I will see you soon, hopefully. Bye bye.